Former PlayStation executive Shawn Layden has said he believes the game console power arms race has plateaued and that the majority of consumers are not interested in marginally more powerful machines. Layden was speaking to VGC over in Gamescom Asia. That's where Andy is, by the way. He's hooring it and touring it over at Gamescom Asia in Singapore. Quote, "We've done these things this way for 30 years. Every generation, those costs went up and we realigned with it. We've reached the precipice now where the center can't hold. We cannot continue to do things that we have done before." Layden added that he believes that in order for the console market to remain healthy, players this must also appeal to a broad audience and consumers who weren't previously players. Quote, "It's time for a real hard reset on the business model, a hard reset on what it is to be a video game. It's not 80 hours, not 90 hours. If that's what it is, it's a whole different category." When asked about the future of console hardware, Layden said he believed that the power boost on its own would not appeal to the majority of players. Quote, "It's plateaued. We're at the stage of the hardware development that I call, quote, only dogs can hear the difference," he said, editorializing. That's quite funny. Quote, "If you're playing your game and sunlight is coming through your window onto your TV, you're not seeing any ray tracing. It has to be super optimal. You have to have an 8K monitor in a dark room to see these things." Editorializing, I don't think that's the case. We'll come back to it. We're fighting over teraflops, and that's no place to be. Interesting thoughts from the man that kind of spearheaded Sony through an incredibly successful generation. Bless, what do you think of Mr. Layden's thoughts on power?
Yeah, I mean, I think he is definitely exaggerating to some extent there, especially talking about, oh man, you can't see ray tracing unless like you got the like if you got the sun shining at your TV. It's like, okay, well that's not the case. I can tell when ray tracing's on or off, and like I think from what I've heard, I've not been able to see the PS5 Pro for myself, but Tim at Kind of Funny has seen it and talked about it, and hearing him talk about Gran Turismo 7 or talking about Final Fantasy 7 Rebirth in the before and after of playing on a PS5 Pro versus playing on a base PS5. It seems like there is a tangible difference there that I think, matters to somebody like him who is very passionate about fidelity and very passionate about getting the most high-tech, high-fidelity experience possible. That said, the soul of what Layden's saying, I kind of get, and I think I might side with him a little bit as far as I think we are getting to a place where console generation, jumping from generation to generation, I think is meaning less and less to people, especially because I think that's backed up on the business side as well, where you're having all these games that might be PS5 exclusive also come out for PS4 at the same time, right? Like, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe like God of War Ragnarok was PS4. Yeah. Like Horizon Forbidden West came out on PS4. The PS5, truly PS5 exclusive games feel a bit more few and far between, more so than previous generation jumps. And I think that's going to continue, right? I think when we get to PlayStation 6, that's going to continue. If we get to PlayStation 7, right? Like, I think the more and more we add in the new generations, the less and less we're seeing, I guess, the tangible feeling of a difference. Even if, even if in reality, I know there was the quote from, I think it was Sarah Bond, when they talked about how they're working on the next generation of Xbox, they mentioned that it's going to be the biggest leap for an Xbox. But the biggest leap might be true in terms of numbers. Like, it might be true as far as like, oh yeah, if we jump from 4K to 8K, like we're doubling the K, like, that's more so than the jumps you had previously, or, whatever metric you want to put it by. I can believe it in the literal sense, but in terms of what we're feeling, in terms of what I feel when I jump from PS2 to PS3 versus PS3 to PS4 versus PS4 to PS5, it feels like less of a noticeable jump for me as a player. And so, I think the question about what to do with that information that Shawn is talking about ends up being where the interesting conversation is, which is, how do you maintain interest in the audience? How do you, curate to an audience that might be feeling fatigue on that side of things? Do you compete with content? How do you compete with content? That's the stuff I'm curious about.
Yeah, I think there's an issue with being invested in a medium during its first 50 years where, while the three of us weren't alive for the nascent stages of video games, we have lived through the most transformative period of it. There will come a time when the changes are so small that the people in our position age-wise will have only known PS4 to 5 to 6, to the point where it becomes iPhone-style refreshes. It's like small bumps for the heads. The heads know this one is like 5% faster or whatever, but it's not that thing that is this kind of all-consuming change like it used to be. Aiden, do you think Shawn's on the money here? And I know we're in the camp where we like the newest, freshest, but I think he has. I mean, he knows what he's talking about.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's one of those things you could easily argue it, like we've been saying. It's not as big a jump. It might not be perceived as big a jump from what we had in the earlier generations, but at the same time, looking back on what we had with the PS4, and I don't always see it necessarily as just the games either. It's like the hardware as well.
Yeah.
I would hate to go back to PS4, knowing how long the load times are, how loud the fans are. Yeah, there's things beyond just like the graphics, and I think that's like a lot of people put it all down to graphics, but it's not always just that, and it's not always just the kind of hardware side either. It's the things that the game can actually do, like the hardware itself. I'm going to bring up a game that you love, Jordan, the Finals.
Oh, yeah, hell of a game.
This game, though, like when you think about the destruction in that game, that was not possible on previous generations. Like, even if you look back and what was going on in the PS4, that was not happening at all. And that's the thing that, like, maybe it's not let's put side by side these two faces and see how many pores we can see, but it's things like that go along with it that I think are making the big differences, at least for someone like me. And I know we're saying we are into that stuff, but I do think people notice it, or maybe it's something people don't appreciate in the same kind of way. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's a case of, in our position as the hyper consumer, there is nothing about games that we don't know. That's what it says on my tattoo, at least. We get excited when it's like, on the Series X you can flip between multiple games, like that I can't remember the name of that feature that I always complain that I'd love it to.
The quick resume.
Quick resume, yes. I'd love the PlayStation to have that. That to me is like the most next gen feature across both those consoles. That's fantastic. But you're not going to put that in a TV advert. Who cares about that? Only the hyper consumer that's playing 1,000 games. Like all the PS5, all the original PS5 reviews look so funny now because all of them are like, this controller's the future. Every game's going to use it. It's going to be amazing. And then like no game used it apart from Returnal and a bit of Spider-Man, only kind of first party stuff. So yeah, I think what a next gen change means for players outside of this kind of hyper consumer tier is changing. But so the way I measure how successful a console is if my 8-a-side group chat cares about it. And as soon as the PS5 Pro was spoken about, one of them came up to me and said, I hear that GTA 6 is going to look much better on the PS5 Pro, so I'm going to get it. That's all they need. Like, they need that kind of thing. So I don't think that, even though, yes, the teraflop race is very boring, I don't think anyone outside of this area of kind of the enthusiasts cared about that in the first place. In terms of PS5 Pros, Blessing, where are you at with it? And I know we're in a weird situation where we might end up with them, but are you getting one? If you were in a situation where you weren't going to get a company one, would you get one?
I don't think I would, at least for now. I'm somebody who I don't even play games on a 4K TV. I play games on my monitor at my desk, and so I think like a lot of the benefits of a PS5 Pro would be a bit lost on me. Like I know that I'll still be able to see like better fidelity in games, right? Like a lot of it is happening not just on the 8K level or whatever, but it is happening like It is the forget what the PSSR and
the pisser?
the pisser. Thank you. I didn't know if I was allowed to say that on all these platforms, but it's the PSSR and it's the ways in which you can get ray tracing and performance and all that stuff. Like that stuff will be noticeable for me if I got the PS5 Pro, even playing on my regular 1080p monitor, but. For me, it's just not worth it right now. Like, I don't have the desire. I'm not in a place where I'm looking at these games and I'm like, oh, this is ugly. Even Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, which I think might be a bit more noticeable in terms of the visual shortcomings when you're looking at like textures in the background and things like that. Like, I didn't have a problem with it. Like that's stuff that I think, again, you might have to be somebody who is a bit more, who has more of the eye for that, for that kind of thing to really care on that level. And so if it was like $300 to $400, it would never be $300. But like if it was like $400, $500, I'd be in the maybe camp. For $700, it's not in the cards for me at this moment.
Yeah, I will get one by hook or by crook. And the thing that really sold it for me was I've played a few games this year where it's already been in the back of my head, like, I bet this would be a bit better on
Really?
PS5 Pro. I bet these issues that I'm currently facing would be fixed on PS5 Pro. And
Is one of those
never
games
the
Dragon's
case.
Dogma 2?
Well, yes.
I had to think. I was like, what is a game this year that didn't run well?
Yeah, it's stuff like that, and it's a case of now that I know that the alternative is there, I can't sit idly by while I don't have it. There's also, like, we've said this before, like, part of our remit at VGC feels like we need to, at least one of us needs to be knowing what's out there and being able to report on how this looks on a PS5 Pro, because people will buy it as a segment of the audience we kind of have to serve, but it is something that I'm not excited. I'm way more excited to get my grey PlayStation 5 Slim that's coming than I am.
Did you get one of those?
Oh yeah, I got one of those.
Nice.
Come on now. I got
See,
the 30th anniversary.
I opted for I've got the Portal coming. The Portal and the controller.
The Portal that stayed in stock for like 8 days after it went on sale because no one
I'm going to be one of those happy customers.
What about you, Aaron? If it wasn't a work thing, would you be day one or would you be leaving it?
I think I'd be day one, to be honest. I'm a sucker for, like, they go, this is X times faster. I'm like, all right, cool. You do not need to tell me anything else. I was the same with the PS4 Pro. Admittedly, this is less of a, it's a harder sell with this one than it was with the PS4. But no, I'm totally up for this. And immediately, as soon as they announced it, I was thinking about all of the games that, like Alan Wake 2. I can't wait to play Alan Wake 2 on the Pro. I'd like to see all the enhancements of all these different games that maybe, like, we're pushing the PS5 already, and it could just go that little bit further, like Dragon's Dogma 2 as well. There's things on the PS5 that I'd love to see on the Pro. So when it was announced, there's just a new. Well, when we started seeing, those Digital Foundry side by sides, that's when I'm like, as well, there's I've never even played Hogwarts, but the side by side of
those
the
guys
two,
could fucking sell me anything, honestly. If you talk about it for long enough, I'm like, yeah, no, you're right.
I'm sure, yeah. I don't understand anything he's saying, but I trust him. He's making hard eye contact.
They're like, it's getting 40% of this rather than 35%, and I'm like, fucking yes, what? Come
Keep
on,
telling the numbers, keep shouting those numbers. But yeah, I totally would be there for that. I honestly, like, the thing as well. So I have a PlayStation 5 in my office, and then, like, I have one up in my living room where I typically would sit and play games if I wasn't recording. And I know now that I'll have the Pro down here for recording, and I'm going to be like, I might as well just bring it upstairs just to make sure. Yeah, I just need to get to. Yeah, easy enough. Do you want to buy a PS Portal 30th anniversary edition? Maybe need some funds.
Look, I like the PS Portal. I think the Portal was great, but I do not need a 30th anniversary one. More from Shawn Layden coming soon. I got a little preview of that chat, and it's very interesting. He's an interesting guy. I think it's great that since he left Sony, he's just kind of floated around, taking shots at them from afar, being like, yeah, the blockbuster games, they're not doing it anymore. Your powerful consoles are shit.
It's fun hearing it from him too, because obviously he's a legitimate voice when it comes to that stuff, right? Because he was the head of PlayStation, and it makes me think a lot about where we're going to be at a console generation from now. If the blockbuster stuff isn't working, if, like, what he's talking about as far as, like, the incremental upgrades between consoles, like, if that's a continued thing, when we're, I guess, in 2032, which doesn't feel like a real year, but it'll feel real very soon. When we're there and we're with the PlayStation 6, like, our game's going to be vastly different. Is PlayStation going to be vastly different? Is it going to be you're playing a bunch of live service stuff because they can't afford making the blockbuster hits anymore? Like, where are we going to be at?
That 2032 is going to be the year that Xbox gets it together. They're going to have all their first party games in a row, and that's
the dominoes are going to fall finally.
It's all been building to this, a slow burn.